Hey, welcome to the 402nd episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patron Caroline Craighead. I'm Matt Enlow.
And I'm Warren Kaplan, and today we have Felicia Day on the podcast, someone that Matt and I have both known about for a very long time. I think Matt kind of had some connections to her, but there is some really unfortunate news, which is that Matt did this interview without me. Rare occasion.
Yeah. I think this is my first interview without you.
Yeah, but Felicia Day, the huge bummer is she's here to talk about her scripted podcast.
Yeah.
And I have a scripted podcast
You
also,
have a scripted
and I wasn't
podcast.
on the interview with her.
And I brought it up. You know, look, it was a really great conversation. Felicia is a gifted creator, host, actor, all of the things. She pioneered she pioneered web video for us. Like, we were kind of riding on her coattails when we first...
She invented vlogging.
But she did invent, create the show, The Guild, in which she also stars, which we talk about a decent amount. But she has a new scripted podcast out called Third Eye. But she's gifted at speaking eloquently about all sorts of topics. Specifically, we dig in on the nature of creativity and how she kind of reinvented her creative process over the pandemic. And through this podcast, essentially.
Did she tell you about how she originally pitched it as a TV show?
We did talk about that. And then also how she found a rhythm in having to write essentially this entire show herself and how she broke that. And we go pretty deep. It's pretty great. You know, it's funny because we are old pals, not like we're best friends, but we've known each other for a long time. And so... But I feel like she kind of is one of those people where it feels like you've known them for a long time, no matter what. We talk about her history. We talk about the evolution of not just web media, but just kind of making things as people our age, more or less. And so I think it's a really good conversation if you're thinking about what your next steps are, if you're curious about podcasting in general, or just curious about other mediums that aren't strictly filmmaking and why you might be interested in experimenting in that way. She's got graphic novels going. She's writing a ton. It's a good conversation.
That's awesome. I can't wait to hear it, especially since we got our next 3 episodes of my scripted podcast ordered. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, oh no, we have to write more.
Yeah. Congratulations, Oren, by the way.
We got the pilot finally accepted after a few rounds of notes. And now it's like, let's do 2 through 4. And it's, it's like all you want is for them to love it. But then when they do, it's really intimidating to write more episodes. Reminds me of the Seinfeld special where Larry David, after Seinfeld got picked up, he had like an anxiety attack. He's like, it took us so long to write this first episode. Like, how on earth are we going to write an entire season? And after that, it got picked up for another season and he like almost lost it. He's like, but I love that some of the best pieces of writing were written by people who were scared to write.
I think also, look, it's a muscle. Things get a little bit easier. And, in success, you figure out the voice of the show. The first episode is the hardest to write because you're still figuring it out, Mm-hmm. And I would, I don't know if you've rewatched the first season of Seinfeld in a while, Oren, but it's not as good as when they hit their stride.
You really? You don't think it's...
Yeah, dude.
Well, I know. Man. I've read the pilot.
Yeah, the pilot, the first episode, there's a reason you haven't seen it many times.
Right. Well, first of all, it's only George and Jerry. There's no Elaine or Kramer in it.
They just hadn't figured it out yet. Yeah.
They'd figured out that it was like about nothing, about the little things in life.
Also, this is weird, but like there are things like in the coffee shop, they're at a table instead of a booth. Jerry wears a baseball shirt, which is so strange. All of the things that you recognize Seinfeld to be, it isn't yet. So,
right.
I guess my advice, Oren, is like write like a couple seasons, put together a really incredibly gifted room of gifted comedy writers, and then you yourself evolve as a voice and as a writer for a few years, and then you'll be fine.
Yeah. I mean, you know that we've been working on this show since before COVID. So my writing partner, Julie, was like, if we keep going at this pace, we will be done writing the show in like 2028 or something. So hopefully it'll go out of style and back in style by then.
Well, I can't wait to hear it.
Yeah, I'm so excited to listen to this episode too. I will be listening along with you all in your gymnasiums, running on the treadmill, listening to this podcast.
Anyway, you should go to patreon.com/justshootitpod, where you can throw us a buck or two to keep the show going. We're incurring more costs like crazy.
Matt's stylist has just raised her rates, and patreon.com/justshootitpod. That's where you should go. $1, $2, $425. I challenge you.
We are on the brink of recording special content for patrons only. So if you want to get in on that, if you want to be one of the people who gets additional Just Shoot It content, go to patreon.com/justshootitpod and be the first to hear it.
Especially you, the person that we saw on Instagram that said that we were their most listened to podcast according to Spotify.
Couple people, shout out to them.
So now you better keep it up.
You know what's really daunting is when you see how many minutes they listen to us yammer, and you think, boy.
Yeah. You're like, you should be listening in two times the speed. I was listening to Jordan Brady's podcast. He just had a guest that is also a listener of his. And his guest said, it's so weird to hear your voice in single speed, like 1x.
Sure.
So that was a funny comment. Okay, enough wasting everyone's time. Let's talk to Felicia Day.
Felicia Day, welcome to Just Shoot It. Very excited to have you on.
When I saw your name pop up as far as a interview, I was like, what? Matt? How do I know that? Wait, that's Matt.
We go way back from the internet days. Normally I have a co-host as well, Oren Kaplan, who also did a lot of web video back in the day, but kind of somehow in a different circle.
As small a community as it was, there were circles.
Do you miss it?
Do I miss the web video days?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, isn't it weird that a whole like a whole filmmaking community just disappeared because they became irrelevant? I don't know. It's like the talkies came in and it's like, oh,
Sure.
silent film, no way. I missed the first couple years where we were just kind of like, it was kind of like Sundance, we were just making stuff without permission. We were all thinking we're real cool. We were just shooting at our houses. And, a lot of people were making artistic, like really pseudo television stuff
Sure.
and
Yeah.
indie film. It was indie film. And then it became very much personality driven. And then the ad sales kind of ruined any chance of making anything with a budget. And, it all disappeared. So it was a long, I was in it until I left my company in 2018. So essentially, I was still in it, but it was the dying years, the last couple years were just it was so clear that it was clear that the writing was on the wall when I tried to get the Guild, season 7 made, and they were like, "Well, no, we're not gonna fund things at that level." I'm like, "What level are you talking about?" Because at that time, you were like, "You spent 200,000 on something, and you are just must be burning money for fun."
Sure.
I mean, honestly, the attitude was so weird,
Yeah.
and what I always wanted to do was, like, mini TV. And that quickly proved to be untenable. And so then everything turned to non-scripted and quick and dirty things and just volume, volume, volume. And it was just not what I loved. So yeah, I miss like the first 4 years. And then after like 2011, when I started a YouTube company, by the way,
Sure.
that was well, it was actually 2012 because I did a really lot of cool, like, scripted stuff, the first slate, and then all of that was wiped clean. They're like, "You can't do that anymore. Just do
Right.
stuff that will get more hits and cost less." And I was like, "Oh. Oh, wait, what?" So, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, kind of the same, like it felt really like, oh, maybe we were all gonna own our own IP and build a livelihood around this, and things kind of shifted. But the good news
some
is
people made it. Some people made it. Like,
Sure.
I mean, listen, Issa Rae, my
Sure.
God, like, she's a juggernaut, I remember
Sure.
going to lunch with her and telling her, "Please do not start a company, girl." And this was before, she even had her show. And, Rachel Bloom, again,
Sure.
started from web video. What was it? The Comedy Central, Broad City.
Sure, Broad
There was
City. Yeah, yeah.
a lot of them already had like deep Hollywood roots already. It was a
Hmm.
vehicle to try to create IP, but, I mean, some people made it through. It just was much rarer than you would have thought. And you really already had to be inside it and, like, show them your work, and then that was something that their people could use to get them to another level, and, you know, yeah, it was fun.
I'm curious to see what the next few years evolve into for young filmmakers because I think there is kind of like there's no farm system for people
No,
who want to like make television or especially on the directing side. It's like without
forget it.
a college humor or a funny or die or anything like that. There's not really a way to learn how to work with a crew, and that's going to have to change somehow. And maybe it won't be a DIY sort of avenue. Maybe it'll be more, I don't know, different programs and like, all of these different networks have those sort of systems where they're kind of like selecting a panel of people and like,
Yeah.
maybe that works. I don't know, but something has to change because, you know, TV directors are still like, a lot of them are still like in their 50s and 60s. And it's like,
Yeah. I mean,
mm,
yeah, you really have to go
somebody
through a
move that guy's
training program.
porch, right?
I
Yeah.
mean, when I
Yeah.
first, I've worked with a lot of student film, USC and UCLA. That's how I started. And quite frankly, as Hollywood as you can be, those I mean, you learn a lot, but you don't learn how to be on a set. I
Yeah.
mean, those students are starting from 0 when they get on a professional set, right? And I wish I had known that. I mean, I wish I had not done acting scene study classes and I just volunteered for more film sets and watched actors work because when you're on set, it's a completely different world than, acting, on a stage or acting in a scene study or whatever. And, yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that what is interesting is, like, you could have, like, Freddie Wong, doing, like, amazing blockbuster type and why Freddie never, did a big movie is beyond me. Maybe that was his choice. I've never really talked to him about it. But, like, there was some filmmaking in the day that was really, really amazingly high quality and, transitioning whether you didn't want to or not, like, it's very interesting, and I think, if you look at TikTok and stuff, there's some amazing filmmaking going on there, like, you really have to be savvy about where the camera is, transitions, like, everything but performance probably. Um, but again, that's not gonna teach you how to work with 200 people, and
Hmm.
that's
Hmm.
really, really tough, and it's intimidating, and it's hard, and boy, I mean, I won't and I don't envy people who have to make that transition. You really do need to get your feet wet somehow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think also the politics of it all, right? Like, and this maybe is a great segue into like the difference between being able to put together an awesome web series, for instance, and running your own company or pitching your own IP, your own ideas to corporations, right? Is
Oh,
a
yeah.
totally different skill set, right? And I think, um, you were the poster child of kind of watching that evolution happen, right? You started, The Guild was a show that was vi like, self-funded or, I take it back, it was even like you had a PayPal button, right? Back in the day. It was
Well, we
very
did.
scrappy. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the scrappiest of it was before Kickstarter, we had a PayPal button, and we
Sure.
pre-sold DVDs, and then Kickstarter came out, like, the next year, but then we got funding through Xbox, but I always retained the IP, and then we took it back to YouTube, as part of my YouTube company, Geek and Sundry, which was a funded YouTube channel. They funded it for 2 years, and then I sold it to Legendary Entertainment. And yeah, I mean, it was definitely everybody kind of looked at me as like, "Whoa, that's the template, man."
Sure.
But like,
And
I'm honored, but, yeah, behind the scenes, it wasn't as fun.
sure.
I'll
Yeah,
just tell
well,
you that.
yeah, yeah, of course, and so I guess I'm curious about, um it's almost like you're getting an MBA in real time, right? Like, you start
Oh,
as,
yeah.
like, an actor, and then all of a sudden, you're running your own company.
Not
Um
well. Not well. I'll just
Gotcha.
tell you that right now, like, I know how I'll be on set 15, 16 hours and I won't, like, sweat it, but I'm in an office for 1 hour and I'm, like, getting the hives, and this is my own company, right?
Mhm.
So it was not and I didn't have the skill sets, and I wasn't able to find the right partners to take it and make it a business, and business making of film and content is like a whole nother deal. And unless you are able to surround yourself with people who really know how to do what you need to do, which none of us did because we were all inventing it. So I can't even blame anybody. We were all just doing our best. And I hit on some great ideas, but baking those ideas into profitable businesses wasn't something I could necessarily, connect the dots with. And that's why we weren't a multi-billion-dollar company where we're selling it, because I wasn't willing to do some of the things that I needed to do, like become an MCN, just rolling up people's companies and telling these talent, these poor innocent people that, "Hey, I'm gonna place ads and you're gonna make money." And really you're just, you're a name on a spreadsheet to try to get money from bigger people and you're never gonna be handled right. Like I wouldn't do it. And of course, I probably should have just to make money, but it was not the business I wanted to be in. And that's
Yeah.
what web video became.
Right, right. Yeah. And so for listeners who don't know, MCN was a multi-channel network, right? So there was a handful of companies that like Felicia was saying, just kind of sucked up any willing person with any sort of following, promising them, "Oh, we'll sell ads for you. You don't have to worry about it. You can focus on the
Will
creative, and
manage you almost, yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly." And then, um, unfortunately, whether they were lying or just had good intentions and it didn't pan out, the ad market wasn't there to support basically anything, right?
Yeah, but the 1% people did cash out, like Maker, Machinima, like I
Sure.
can name like 10 companies, Defy, like there were all these companies with these dudes who were always making business at mixers, and I was like, "Oh, they really know what they're doing," but I'm like, it turned out they didn't. They were just building a shell that was attractive enough that one of them would get bought by Disney or one of them get bought by, and then they'd shut down eventually because it just didn't work. But it was all a shell game. This is what I've discovered about most business. It really is just all a shell game until you could sell to the highest bidder and get your money out. I mean, that really is.
Sure.
That's not what I did with my company, but at the end of the day, that's what I guess the quote unquote smart people did. But again, I didn't want to do it for that reason. And I guess naivety got me to where I am now,
Sure,
which is
sure.
like, I'm still making scrappy.
Right. Well, I think also we were kind of at the nexus of like technology being really exciting, right?
Yeah,
Like you were huge on Twitter, like that. It was like, oh, Twitter is new, and like there are people who can get famous on it, and like just
yeah,
from thinking out loud and promoting their show and stuff like that. You can own your own audience that way. And I wonder if maybe some of that shell corporation plan, it feels very tech to me, right? Like
yeah,
you're just burning money as fast as you can, hoping that you're going to get acquired by Google or something like that, right?
yeah. Yeah, but also, I mean, what appealed to me was that, I've been in the business a long time. Like, I moved here in like 2000, 2001. And I know that my sensibilities and my stories are not that attractive to the business of Hollywood. They aren't, I mean, I've gone back time and time again, like, okay, this is it. This is the realm where you're going to sell that TV show. This is what you're going to do. And I'll go around and I'll pitch. I'm very good at pitching. And people are like, that's the best pitch I've ever heard. It's not quite right for us right now. Like over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And like, that's why I kind of clung to the web way past the time where I was like, I saw the writing on the wall, but, like, just the fact that I could have my little corner and make the things that I wanted to make was enough because, again, like, part of the story is this Audible project that we'll talk about eventually, but, that was a TV show. The Guild was a TV show. Didn't wanna get made, and I loved it so much, I'm like, "I'm gonna figure out how to make this," and, like, the years that I was pitching after I left my company, I was like, "Okay, now is it. You don't have that company anymore. You could sell a TV show." And again, I'm just banging my head against a wall. And maybe at a certain point, you just try to figure out, like, what story can I tell that these people will buy? And then you're not even
Mhm.
telling your story. You're telling a story that's you're trying to service somebody else's need for a story. And that's just not why I wanna do this. Like, I love acting and I love hosting and I make a fine living doing that. And I could tell my stories however I wanna tell them. That's the career I'd rather have than be working on a show that I kinda sold because, like, some executive likes it, but it's not what I wanna do every week. So I don't
Yeah.
know, I it's just me.
Yeah. It's interesting also because, um, you've made a name for yourself in a very specific niche. Like your brand is crystal clear, right? So the Guild
Yeah,
was about online gamers who kind of came together in real life to support each other and hijinks ensued. right? And even your books, they always mention weird in the name. There's always like a fantasy element. You were on Eureka, you were on The Magicians. Like you're very clearly in the world of conventions, right? Like
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
a genre star, uh, and
Yeah,
so it's
that's what I wanna be. Thank you.
sure, yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah, for
great.
sure,
I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, same, same, and that's wonderful. But so I guess what I'm saying is like your brand precedes you, and so when you're going into pitch, presumably it's clear to executives, what flavor you're selling. Do you
No.
know what I mean? No.
No, because that's my and that I will blame on myself. I think that I did not have good representation, and I won't say that they weren't good people. They just were not for me, and they didn't understand me. And so I went, many years with not even auditioning for a genre piece. I would go in for network comedies because I'm a very good comedic actor, and I will say that I
Mhm,
think my
mhm,
strengths are comedy, and I tend to play comedic characters within genre pieces, and that's
mhm,
kind of
mhm,
my mark. And it's a as you said, it's a very narrow niche, but it's what I love doing, and I do it well. I think for mainstream Hollywood people, they're like, "Oh, she's funny. We'll just put her in a comedy." And
mhm,
I would meet with like Adam Sandler's company and like all these, and I'm like, at a certain point, I'm, like, getting down on myself because 'cause I'm not selling a comedy, and I'm
mhm,
not selling anything, I'm not getting hired, and I'm just like, "What? I must be terrible." No, it wasn't me, it was m the what was terrible with me is that I was so lost after my company was sold, and I was kind of stripped of all my web stuff. I didn't know who I was, and I kinda let other people handle me. And I think the most important thing you can do in this business is really identify who you are, what you wanna do, and where you wanna go. And I had a reputation, and when I went back to Hollywood, I didn't know not to believe other people enough, right?
mhm,
Because it's like,
mhm,
I'm in a new world, I need to let other people's advice lead me because I don't know if I'm doing it right, and they didn't know more than me. They don't. They don't know
mhm,
anything
mhm.
more than you, I promise you.
Yeah, no, I love that. That is great advice, and frankly, pretty eye opening, right? Because from the outside looking in, we were joking about how long it's been since we caught up. We're acting like you stepped away from Hollywood, but you've been on TV this whole time.
Yeah,
Do
I've
you
been
know?
working. I've been
Yeah, yeah,
working.
yeah, yeah.
Well, actually,
Yeah.
I haven't had any acting, or any representation. I have not had a representative except for voiceover in books since 2018 until, like,
That's
2
wild.
months ago.
That's
I
wild.
finally hired someone, and you're right, it was just all people calling me,
Right.
but I
Again,
had
because
to.
the brand is so strong. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's like, oh, who'd be right for this? Felicia Day.
Yeah,
Right.
but I haven't even been on breakdowns, and so I kinda just had to quit. I really had to, for my own mental health, step away and figure out what I wanted to do because I was blaming everybody else for not getting where I wanted to go, and at the time, didn't even know where I wanted to be, and I
Mhm,
didn't know how to get there, and I wasn't firm enough to be like, "Hey, these are the people I need to help me get there, and these are my goals." And yeah, it seems like an eternity, but it really was COVID, so it seems like it's 1 year ago.
mhm,
But it wasn't. It was a substantial amount of time, and in that time, I did a lot of video game streaming and soul searching and raising my kid and being a human being and writing a lot. And I I
mhm.
I discovered that the stories I wanna tell are not necessarily television stories. They're not gonna be like things that I pitch to ABC and are bought instantly. It might be a book that I write that somebody options, but at the end of the day, I just wanna make things, and I don't wanna be in development for years, which I was for a bunch of projects, and it's like, this is not fun for me. I don't wanna
Yeah,
develop this for 3 years and then have nothing happen again and again and again. That's what happened. And
yeah.
so I'm in a much better place because I know exactly what I wanna be doing with my time as a storyteller and as an actor.
Can I relate to so much of this, Felicia. Um, um, especially like, yeah, oh, the development stuff it's truly brutal. And is the thing that, I think when we were all starting out, you thought that was the prize. It was like, "Oh, I
Yeah.
sold a show to this place. Like, how cool is that to say?" And then you cash a little check and you're like, "Oh, great, maybe this is gonna be something." And you spend years wasted. But I'm curious though, you mentioned, like, uh, writing, playing video games, just living your life. Were there any, practical like, any practices, anything you did to recenter yourself to help you figure things out, right? Um Any
Yeah.
tangible like exercises maybe is what I'm
I
asking.
mean, I wrote a creativity book, actually. I wrote a book called, Embrace Your Weird, and I wrote that in 2019, so it really was the start of me figuring myself out, and it was I don't know if you've ever done The Artist Way by Julia Cameron. Yeah, so that's
I'm married to a person who's done The Artist's Way.
okay. So,
So
like, The
I did the
Artist Way.
lightweight version.
You did the lightweight version. So,
Yeah.
basically, I did The Artist Way, and that's what got me to write the Guild and
Yeah.
got my career on track. So, I will say that even though there's a lot of spirituality in there that does not connect with me, that book really helped, and I went back to do it, and I was like, "Oh, this God stuff, I hate it," I was really like, oh, and I ended up wanting to write my own version without the God stuff, but really made people dig into their past, their present, their future, their dreams, overcoming procrastination, jealousy, all of it, and I put it in a book, and the end result is like, you gotta pick something to work on now that you've really figured out who you are, and this is a complete excuse for me to put myself back together after leaving my company, after having a child, which really transforms your whole outlook on life, and just kind of like being naked for a while and not really knowing what to wear. So that book really, really helped me in writing it. And sometimes I even go back and read a book on, there's a chapter on, you know, anxiety and procrastination, which is I need to go back and read now because I'm totally procrastinating from writing my next project.
Listen, you're
But
talking
like
to somebody with a podcast, Felicia. So
yeah, I know. Listen, I have 2. No one listens to that. I mean, if the people who listen to 'em, I love you. It's not a big substantial audience, but I'm like, I'm just gonna keep doing it. Anyway, so, yeah, that book really helped me, and out of that book, I ended up, committing to writing this Audible project that ended up being, I don't know, 400 pages of scripted
Mhm.
content. And, like, there is no way that I ever wanna be able to confront that or tackle it before, and I was
Wait,
just like,
hold on. Did you walk in to pitch with a 400-page
"Oh,
manuscript
no.
behind
No, no,
you?
no, no, no.
Oh, okay.
No, no, no." I had the pilot I had written in 2016. And this was a project that having sold my company to Legendary, I was like, "Hey, you guys," they gave me a development year, which was amazing. And they were like, "This is the script I wanna act in, and I wanna write, and I want to sell." And, they were like, "Great." They were like, "We'll help you develop it, we'll help you package it." The guy who bought my company got fired, like, the week after, and
Sure.
nothing really ended up being exactly what I thought. I'm not gonna talk really about all of that, but it was, again, not you think you're in the trades. You sold a
Mhm,
company. You have a
mhm.
development deal. Like, it all should be rosy, and it's Hollywood. Nothing's rosy on
Sure.
nothing's rosy except in the trades when the gloss is on there. So,
It is truly hard to explain how frequently you will get a deal and then your champion gets fired.
always happens to people. It is not uncommon. Always,
Always.
always. That happened to, an animation show that I was producing that was incredible. It sold to Freeform. I was in the trades. I feel fancy finally,
Mhm,
and it gets developed. We're paraded around. They bring in a new head of content, and she's like,
mhm.
"Nope, we're
Yeah.
we're wiping the slate clean," and it's just like, it is what it is, and you can't fight it. You just have to roll with it, but you gotta figure out how you can exist outside it, because
Mhm.
otherwise, you just become a depressed a-hole, which I'm sure I was, and I hope I don't go back to that again, but it's very hard not to if you're in the business.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about Third Eye, which is the project that you ended up taking and pitching around. It's a podcast. Like you mentioned originally, it was maybe going to be a TV show. When did you realize, oh, this is a podcast? And what walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I like I said, I had tried to sell this in 2016 with Legendary. I had to get my own showrunner on board. We went and pitched it. He was amazing, but he was not a half-hour showrunner. I was pitching a genre half hour, which at the time nobody had done since like Bewitched. Nobody wanted to hear it. The Comedy Central exec looked at me like I pooped on a table when I mentioned there's a vampire. It was not a very smooth process. There were business reasons why it didn't sell to a couple places. So anyway, et cetera, it didn't, and I was devastated. I mean, I was so my staff at Geek and Sundry actually made me a neon sign with Third Eye on it because they were like, "This is your deal. This is it. This is your time." I still have that sign. It's
And
behind my desk.
you just walked into the office and turned it off.
You're just like, "Boom." Yeah, so 2 years went by
Uh,
almost, and, like, 2018, William Morris I was at William Morris at the time, and one of the podcasting agent was like, "Hey, I think this could be, Why don't we try to shop
Mhm.
it around?" And I think they showed it to a couple places, and one of the Audible execs was a writer, and he really responded to it, and within, like, it was a slow process, to get all the contracts done, but they bought it, and they were like, "Great, you can write it like a TV show, you can have a staff of writers, we'll get it done in 6 months," and the minute I signed the contract, COVID hit, and all those plans went up into air,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I was like, "Well, I'm still being paid a little amount for this. I'm gonna just write it," and I was like, "I'm just gonna do it myself. I need 7 hours of content," or 6 hours was, like, the minimum, and it was 10 episodes of television, and I had not ever that was as much there's as much content in Third Eye as 6 seasons of The Guild,
Sure.
I'll say that.
Yeah.
So, it's
Yeah.
a whole 10 episodes. So that's
It
it, and I wrote it, and it took, 2.5 years? I don't know. It was on and off. It wasn't, like, continuous writing, but it
Sure,
was
yeah, you weren't like, "I'll be back, honey," and then locked the door and started typing, right?
yeah, no.
Um, wouldn't it be nice? But so well, tell us a little bit about the gear shift then, like, because, all of a sudden you're writing for audio, right? Like, like, all the show don't tell mantra, it gets turned on its head a little bit, right? It's still true, you still have to do that, but you don't have a moving image behind you anymore.
Yeah, that was a big learning curve. I had written a half-hour I had written like a 40 it was more like a 45-page pilot that ended up becoming the outline for the first 2 episodes for this, and again, I come from a visual medium. I also come from a short form medium. So,
Mhm.
like, writing this was a big and I had written pilots. I had adapted Red Sonja for, like, the Weinstein Company, and they never paid me. It's great because they went bankrupt. But they still own my characters and my story, so that's great. Hi, Hollywood.
Yeah.
So I developed TV. I've written several pilots, again, samples. Ended up being samples because nobody wanted to buy them. But, so to confront this amount of material was very intimidating. I did have a writer who briefly came in and kind of had some staff experience, and we started breaking the show, but then he had to leave, so it was basically me. And I ended up reading this book called Into the Woods by I believe his name is James York, and I have read a lot of, screenwriting books, and I have always found all of them to be either intimidating or not inspiring. Nothing has ever inspired me until I read this book, and this was, recommended to me by John Rogers, who is a huge, showrunner, created Leverage and, like, 20 other shows. So, anyway, I read this book, and for some reason, it really clicked with me, and the basis of it is really about the 5-act structure, which is very popular in, the BBC in Britain. He used to, I think, be an executive at BBC. So, like, the 5-act structure worked perfectly for my 10-episode podcast, right? And so I just started digging in, and it's the only time I've ever read a book that really gave me a handle on how to kind of break structure and build story and character. And I'm a very character, based writer. I'm not very good at twists and turns. I really am just like, let's get in a character's head and just walk around. And I'm
Mhm.
like that with all my characters. And like, let's create relationships and like have heart, but also have a lot of funny jokes. So this is definitely a comedy, but there's moments of reality. And underneath it all is that sense of failure that I felt because the show is about a failed chosen one, kinda like Harry Potter, like, chokes and doesn't beat Voldemort, and, like, 10 years later, how do you live with yourself, essentially? And so, that sense of, like, being a failed prodigy in a way, was something I could really associate with and sort of gnash on emotionally while I was doing all these jokes. So, yeah, I think that really helped me, and that book really helped me just break down and, I started from an episode structure, episodes sort of character arcs over 10 episodes. I broke it down even more. I would scatter around. I have the not clean process. I am not efficient. I'm not clean. I'm
Mhm.
not a professional TV writer who can just kind of like, oh yeah, it's that scene from Firefly. Go. I can't do it. But at the end of the day, I had the quiet of COVID to really
Mhm.
still my need to get back into Hollywood and be torn to pieces in a way.
Sure.
And it really helped me. So, I kind of found my groove in my own work and not trying to please other people, and it allowed me to spend that time on it, and I'm really blessed because I know going forward that, I'm not gonna be able to have the stillness of that time, how
Mhm.
depressing and still and terrible it was, but at the end of the day, I could find it for myself because I know that I have it in me.
Yeah. Yeah, incredible. Um, Felicia, you can tell you're so good at talking. I could just turn my mic off and just
Oh,
let you
sorry.
keep going. No, no, it's wonderful. I was like, oh, you're answering all the questions I have. So you're breaking, right? You figured it out. 5 act structure. I'm actually maybe I'm a little foggy on it relative. I think of it as like a traditional American television structure. Is it different in some way? Like cold
Well,
open and 1, 2, 3, and or
I mean,
or
it's
no?
more like how to approach it's more of an accordion it's less like here are the commercial breaks, which I'm sure you could just stick in, but, like, this is like he's taking The Godfather and, like, movies and kind of giving you an example of how,
Hmm.
around a midpoint, things sort of reflect each other around a midpoint, as far as character arcs and where you're going
Hmm.
and where you're backing up to, and for some reason, it just really works for me. Again, I've read
Yeah.
every book, every single, Save the Cat, Joseph Campbell, like, I've read them all. They're all in my wall. None of them are, like, resonant and made me wanna pick a pen up until I read this book.
Yeah.
So that's just me, and I think that's the thing that I really and I've taken classes. I think that's the thing that you gotta have to tell yourself that you're not bad or you're not working right because something's not clicking for you. Everybody's got different techniques, right?
Hmm.
And you really just have to figure yourself out. You have to again, it goes back to finding your voice, finding your process, finding how you work, what makes you excited to do this job because honestly, unless you're having some pleasure in it, why do this? Go
Sure.
somewhere else, please. You will make money better other places. So,
Sure.
unless you're really enjoying the work, when you get the work, you get to work on something then and yeah, you gotta find the way you work. You gotta find what makes you excited.
Yeah, I think yeah, the process is its own reward, which can be a little trite to say sometimes. And I hear myself saying it, but like if you don't like it, then what are you doing? Because this is it.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
And I think, to your point, like you were in the trades, you felt shiny, all of that, you sold the company, all that stuff. But if you didn't like the work that got you there, and that's not to
Yeah.
say that you didn't, but you get what I'm saying. Like if you're trying to serve a different master, then all of a sudden, you can come up for air and realize, oh, I've
Yeah,
just
it
been
also
okay.
is yeah, the curse of, like, not to be, like, "Oh, what is suc if success brings you options, do you know what you wanna do there?" And
Hmm.
I think that I got to a point where I was like, "I'm doing great," like, "This is amazing," but it was not being able to see my own forest for the trees, and I'm just, like, in somebody else's forest. I'm just like, "What am I doing here? I don't know. I'm not good at this," and then you just feel like a fraud because 'cause you're just, like, trying to put up an act of like, "Well, I'm still a success. I'm doing great. I love it. I love it. I really
Hmm.
do," and it's
Hmm.
you're not. You're not loving it. I think
I,
and all of it is just me being an actor and, like, finally getting my parking validated and feeling like people aren't treating me like I'm a disposable piece of shit,
mhm.
because as a woman, you say you're an actor and people are gonna be like, "Ugh, is she doable? No, moving on." And that's how you get treated and you you park in the you're just disposable and when I started being, a potential showrunner, people, treated me nice and they treated me with respect and like I had something to contribute. And yet I thought that was what, uh, and yet at the end of the day, unless they could use you, you're still disposable. You're just like slightly more
Sure,
interesting.
sure. Yeah, they just gave you a bottle of water with your parking validation. Right, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a lot of OTJ, on the job training and on the job learning that it's a business and nobody's your friend and nobody's going to be there for you if they're just a business acquaintance. They're there for your success and they're not there for your down. They're there for your ups and not for your downs. So make sure to encircle yourself with people who will be there no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Going back to the journey of the podcast, right? So you figured out how to crack it. You're writing. You feel pretty good about that. Maybe you get some notes or whatever. You're working your way through it. But then, rather than being on set, you find yourself in an audio booth, right? And that's something that certainly you're very familiar with. But now, again, you're as a showrunner. What was different, or how did you approach the act of recording these 10 episodes, which is a pretty monumental amount of, copy to get through, right?
Yeah. I want to go back to just, yeah,
Sure.
adapting something to audio was very, very challenging. And like, I had to come up with a reason. And it was really introducing a narrator.
Mhm.
to guide, and he's played by Neil Gaiman, which I can't even believe he agreed to do it, but he's very lovely and he's incredible.
Can I just
And
say how annoying to be that good of a writer with that voice,
oh, I know. And
right?
he's
It's like when
funny.
an athlete is and he's funny, right?
Yeah.
You see,
He's
like
a good
when
improviser. He did
oh
improv.
boy, boy, oh boy, so good at everything.
I know.
Just pick
It's
a lane.
upsetting.
Just be one of the best graphic novelists of all time, and I'm
No, he's a
happy.
novelist too, and a children's book author.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's pretty
yeah,
monumental, and he's an
yeah,
incredible actor
incredible,
as well.
incredible. Yeah.
So, yeah, I had to, and I think one of the things with audio is, like, you really have to have a hook that makes it, understandable and gives you an ability to describe what's going on and make it a reason that it's audio, because I know,
Mhm.
in this
Sure,
town, everybody's trying to do IP development, and they're making their podcast that is clearly just a
sure.
television show, and yes, mine was a television show, but, I'm not making it with I mean, yeah, it'd be great if it was optioned. I know that's not gonna happen. If it does happen, it won't get made, and if it does, that's the slimmest hope ever, and by goodness, I won the lottery, so fine,
And it
it's
has to
not
stand on its own either way, right?
exactly.
Like, it
Yeah.
has to be good in order
Uh-huh.
for people to wanna option it, right?
Exactly, exactly. So the hook of finding the narrator was very important, but I will say that, in the writing process, it was like 550 pages at one point. I brought a couple of my friends from Mystery Science Theater to come in and help me cut and do some joke pass. And that got it down to 450. And then I was like, Felicia, you got to get rid of this. So, it was just winnowing, winnowing, winnowing. I will say the Audible executives were amazing at their notes. They made me after being burned so far, so
Mhm,
hard in Hollywood, I was like, "Oh my god, somebody can give me notes and I enjoy implementing them and they help
mm,
me."
mhm,
Amazing
mhm,
experience. Um, and every scene, you really have to think, "Wow, am I confused at this point? Do I know
mhm.
what's going on? Do I need to add exposition lines to, like, describe?" And this is like, I conceived it as like a AAA fantasy movie, like a Harry Potter or whatever. So, like, there's action, there's,
Mhm,
like, movement, there's characters coming in and out, there's a huge cast, there's explosions, there's magic. Like, how are we not gonna get lost in all of this? And that was really a really long process, and that process happened until the end of editing, you know? We would
mhm.
get into a scene, and I'd be like, "I'm gonna cut these lines, I don't like them. This scene is feeling slow. I'm gonna add, like, a fork hitting a cup here because I think it's gonna help this line. We're gonna add a reverb on this." Like, it was 6 months of post.
Mhm.
And so it was a very different process. As far as recording, I mean, that's just having fun with people. Like I was confident, the scripts were really tight, and I just hired perfect people, and they were all mostly friends. And I personally read with all of them because I didn't
That's
want it
great.
to sound stiff because a lot of audio things for me sound really stiff. And I was like,
Mhm.
I don't want that. I don't want that quality. I want it to feel like people are just in a room with people
Mm.
overhearing what's going on. So that's all of that. It was let me just tell you, it was from the time we started recording, and it was a year ago, October. We wrapped in July. So that's how long it took to record and do
Wow.
post, and it was rushed. It's crazy.
So then let me ask then, you said that, because the cast is great, right? There's a ton of awesome names. Again, some similar sort of, like, I would say geek
Genre.
icons, genre
Yeah,
genre
Sean
icons. Yeah, sure.
Astin, Will
Sean Astin,
Wheaton.
Danny Pudi's on here, Steve
Yeah.
Agee is an old favorite of mine. How did Neil come about? How did that happen?
I just know him from parties, and I emailed him, and I did not expect him to he was on a list, and I was like, "Well, of course, he's my number 1 favorite," and Audible was like, "He'd be great." I'm like, "Yeah, he would. He's not gonna do this." And I was like, and of course, I get this crawling sense of like, "Oh god, I have to ask a friend a favor," and, like, this is my whole career. Like, I've
Sure.
never paid anybody what they deserve to be on anything, and I've never been paid what I deserve to be on anything I've done. But at the end of the day, I am really lucky because people think what I do is cool, and, hopefully it's successful and gets some attention and makes people feel cool being in it, and yeah, that's how and he literally when he emailed me back, I was like, "He's not gonna do it." And he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna do this, not because, I'm your friend, but I think it's really good." And I started crying at my email
Yeah,
because
that's
for
pretty great.
somebody like that to tell me, "You think this is good?" I mean, I don't you know, it'd be great to be a phenomenon. I don't think anything's a phenomenon right now, but I know that a lot of people enjoy it, and the fact that Neil Gaiman, like, even just said that it was decent was like, "Oh, well, I don't care what happens from now on, I won."
So you've learned all of this stuff, right? You've walked through, you've been to hell and back, right, so to speak. Do you want to do more podcasts? Where's your head at?
Oh,
Where's your heart at now that you've kind of, Third Eye is out in the world and like looking back, what do you want to do next?
I mean, yeah, I'm really proud of it. It's won some awards. It's been on the best of the year list for a couple things. And yeah, I mean, I actually this year I had a feature that I've been trying to get to made for like 8 years. And I did this weird crypto thing that they ended up stealing all my money, but I had enough money that they had given me to do a project, and I was like, "Well, I just have some money. I'm gonna make a podcast." So I essentially self-financed, in a way, this feature, and, one of the actors from the guild, Jeff Lewis, wrote it, and, I helped him. Over the years, we've done, like, 20 revisions of this thing, and we revised it again to make it have a reason that it's a podcast, a little hook. And
Hmm.
I just recorded on my own and, I hired a new manager and I'm like, "Hey, go see if you can sell this to somebody. If not, I'll just release it on Bandcamp for
Yeah.
$5 each and hopefully make my money back." So, yeah, I do I mean, for me, it's the only venue that you can really make something scripted and significant that you can
Hmm.
afford because you can't make something with the camera anymore. I mean, God forbid you try to make a web series. I cringe trying to think like, "Oh, I could just shoot in my house." I'm like, "No, you
Sure.
cannot do that again,
Yeah, yeah.
and no
Don't
one
do
will
it
watch
again.
it."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, Sundance announcements were today, and there is a whole episodics, section now.
Really?
Of yeah,
Independent and episodics?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It's been going for a couple years, and boy, I'm jealous of the cameras they get to shoot with now.
Yeah.
Everything
I
looks
mean, yeah.
so buttery and great. It's pretty great.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the
Um,
Guild was on SD. Guild season 1 was SD, and it's like people are like, "Where's the Blu-ray?" I'm like, A, I can't afford that. B, there is no Blu-ray. Buddy, that's it. That's his Blu
it,
that's my face.
yeah. It's fascinating that you're coming full circle, right? You're just kind of back to doing the DIY, just shoot it model, rather just record it,
Yeah,
in
just
this
record it.
case.
Well, I won't say that I've settled on audio as, like, my form. I mean, I wrote a
Sure.
graphic novel over, last year, and I sold that to Simon& and Schuster, so that's gonna be out 2025, which is wild that takes so long, but again, books are even slower than audio
Mhm.
podcasts. I have another graphic novel, and then next year, I'm hoping to do, like, 2 stage plays, so, yeah, I'm literally just concentrating on the venues that I could tell like, I can self-finance a graphic novel through Image or a couple
Mhm.
other companies,
Mhm.
so I'm literally my whole life is just gonna be writing my stories however I can, even if it becomes a Kindle single, I don't care, and then hopefully people employ me as an actor and a host and a voiceover actor. I love doing it, but I don't wanna deadlift that, and I don't wanna send my stories through the juggernaut because A, they're not gonna make it out, and B, I just wanna make stuff, and I wanna control all of it, and that's where my joy comes, so if I can make that the next 10 years before I just retire and stream video games, I'm okay.
Awesome. Well, amen to that, Felicia.
Thank you.
Um, before we hop into unpaid endorsements, where can listeners find you so that they can keep track of all of the incredible things that you're doing?
Yeah, you could just find me anywhere at Felicia Day, except TikTok is Felicia.day. I have a brand new website at Felicia.day because .day is an extension now, which I thought was so cool. And you can get Third Eye at audible.com/Third Eye. So yeah, I'm basically I stream on Twitch because not because it's my job, it's just my hobby and I love it. And hopefully now that I have representation, I might get acting work. If not, I'll be online and I'll just be making my stuff. I have a newsletter, a couple podcasts, again, just never stopping. I just like
Yeah.
again, I liked making things.
Yeah. I love all of this. And I have to tease you a tiny bit because
Please
you,
do.
you're like, I really had to find myself. And so I wrote a book and then I recorded this incredible podcast. And then also I sold a couple graphic novels. And I also have this side thing, Twitch streaming. You're the busiest depressed person I've ever heard, Felicia.
I mean, I just what?
And
I feel
raising a
like
kid
I'm
at the same
lazy.
time. Yeah.
Listen, we made like dozens of videos a week. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know if you ever did you get sucked into the sort of like, let's make everything, like a kind of
Yeah.
web video? Because, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you literally are, like, shitting out ideas like a machine gun. And, like, I had the idea to do D&D, streaming, and there's this group called Critical Role that I basically discovered, and now they, were able to make their own thing, and now
They have their own Amazon show, right?
they're
Like
like a
they're
billionaire. Yeah,
yeah.
they have their own Amazon several Amazon shows they've turned in because they had not only did they have talent, but they have business savvy, and they had the ability to own their IP. But, Tabletop was an amazing show I wish we coulda kept making, but I don't own the rights anymore. Like, we made a lot of great stuff. It was just like the mandate was to just make things cheaper and faster. And it
Mhm,
got to the point, I mean, you're nodding like you know this, but it's just the frenzy of just not putting any thought into what you're making so that it won't last beyond the moment, but it's like, just do it because we might get some ads against it. It was just debilitating artistically. It was like there was no way you're gonna make anything last, and you don't have a voice that you're saving up to turn into something better.
mhm,
You're just,
mhm.
like, vomiting onto the screen all the time, and, like, I again, I think we made some great stuff considering it, but it was a fight, and it was just exhausting, and it burnt me out, you know? I had no soul left.
Yeah, you make me think though that because you mentioned D&D, you mentioned just, general podcasting, conversational podcasting being a part of that, right?
Yeah,
Twitch streaming. These are all now solidified genres and formats or tabletop is even an
yeah,
example, right? Now we all recognize those as their own genres and their own that have their own audience and if you'd started a tabletop show now, there's a whole
yeah,
subgenre of influencers who are doing that and like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
a real ad market now, right? And but it's interesting to hear you say like, well, you Twitch stream and you also write your own passion projects. I wonder if maybe it's just that we've kind of segmented the expectations a little bit more and that when you're Twitch streaming, you're not using the part of your brain that you use when you're screenwriting, for instance.
No,
Does that
yeah.
make sense?
I mean, uh, no.
Like,
You're saying that well, I mean, being scattered is probably my biggest problem in the world, but
sure, but
again,
it's
I don't
not a
wanna just do
compartment.
one thing.
You have it
It's not a compartment.
compartmentalized. It's not like, "Oh, there's Twitch brain over here and there's screenwriting over there."
I mean, I
Different
think
hemispheres.
that if you really wanna be good at something and succeed, you really gotta just pick a lane, and I just will never pick a lane. And so I'm fine being the master of none and just Jenny of all trades, because that's where my brain works. Why am I working on a stage play? That's gonna make me less money than anything I've made up until this point, and that's not a lot, so I don't care. But, like, that's me. But if I during COVID, I streamed, like, 5 hours a day on Twitch, and I made quite a bit, I made a living because
Mhm,
you show
mhm.
up and and if I made a podcast every single week consistently, like, that could turn into something. So, I think, in this world, it's about consistency and showing up and doing the same thing a lot, and, you know, um, that's great if that's for you, right? But,
Mhm.
inevitably, people who are Twitch streamers get burnt out, and people who are TikTok people get burnt out because the constant output that the audience expects and will remember you to show up for you is exhausting, YouTube, any of it. So the amount and you don't have support, like, you might make a great living, but if once you hire the people who need to be hired to really make it a long-term business, like, there's just no money, like, it doesn't amortize itself. So it is this weird creative, churning mill that we're all in, that we're trying to get to the point where we can, like, have, help to make what we are before we burn out. It's like a race. It's a race of survival almost.
Sure. But so then is the answer to find those different platforms where you can own your own IP and do your own thing, right? Whether that's a comic book or a stage play? Is that
I
the
think you
answer?
gotta find again, you have to I mean, in my opinion, you need to match what the work that you wanna do.
Yeah.
And you wanna put it out there. Like, the ideal situation was me making little videos that were scripted, that we made a movie a season movie a year, that was a guild, it was a big event. We were able to make an event, people waited for it, and we were able to be creative around that, and that was, like, the ideal situation, right, for me, um, making small scripted projects, yes. So I think my advice would be like, what is your passion? Who are you? You really have to do some deep, deep thinking about yourself and not where you want to be. Because you
Mhm.
might end up there and not want to be there because you don't know yourself well enough. So dig down. What delights you? What is your the biggest compliment is that when my friend who was the voice director on Third Eye read the scripts, he was like, "This is the most Felicia Day thing I've ever read." I was like, "Oh, thank you." Because it's clear no one else can write that, and that's what art is, right? Like, you see a Van Gogh. I'm not comparing myself to anybody this fancy, but I'm just saying, you see a movie and you're like, "Oh, that's a Chris Nolan movie. That's a Scorsese," or like, that's an Adam Sandler comedy. I mean, like, everybody's got their brand, and, like, uh, that's the ultimate goal and the ultimate compliment to be like, I can tell your work from other people's because it's obviously you. And I think that's the aspiration that we should all think about. And whatever venue supports that, whatever stories you're trying to say, whatever visual language you're trying to use. I mean, I think TikTok is fantastic. It's a beautiful place to be innovative and make vertical content where, like, do it. Figure out a way to tell your story, but you gotta know yourself first, and I think that's the thing that, people don't put as I think that's the thing that people don't tell people to put as much work
Mhm,
into, but
mhm.
that's what's gonna really serve you long term, because if you have that voice, who knows where you could put your voice? You could put it on a multi-million-dollar movie, you could put it on a graphic novel, you could put it on a web comic or TikTok. It'll all be your work.
It's so funny because we talk a lot about vision versus voice on the show. Oren and I will navel gaze for an episode or two, depending on schedules. And so, as directors, you're often like, you know, you cringe at the idea of saying, "Oh, my vision," when you're talking about directing a Doritos commercial or something, right? The realization that we both had over the years is that, like, the bottom line is that you do have to guide the ship somehow, and you could call that a vision, or you could call that, something else, a mandate, or just an understanding of what we're all trying to make. But that is different than voice, right?
Yeah. Oh, you
Um,
think vision is different from voice?
yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, because your voice, we think is like, or at least I think is much more um internal and kind of impossible to shake. Once you figure it out, when you're making your own creative decisions, that's your voice, right? Like that little voice inside of you that's saying like I like this and not that, or it should be red, not blue. That's
Mm,
all your voice, right?
mhm.
But you could apply that to a Doritos commercial or a podcast or a comic book.
Huh. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I never thought about it like that. I think and you know what? You're right. I think that's what's interesting about my experience with Hollywood and developing stories and stuff. Like, I know what I know is right. Like, I know what's
Hmm.
right for me, right?
Right.
And then when you're in a system where you're servicing other people,
Sure.
especially as a writer, I think directors really get to hang they part and parcel of a director is your voice in a sense. But with screenwriting, it's kind of not in that it's very like they want what they want and they're going to mess with it until they can't. And I think that was the thing that I really had a hard time with. I think as a director, as long as you know your voice, you can you're expected to almost stick by your voice, even if they won't let you do everything. But it's like your voice is what you're being hired to direct. So that's kind of interesting. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah,
Thank you
I
for
mean, you are still in the, a customer service gig
yeah,
ultimately, right? Like you're still, even as a director, like you feel like you call the shots because point and a handful of people put a crane there or something, but there's still a friggin' executive who's like, I don't like that, or commercials
yeah,
is the worst, right? Like
oh yeah,
you're just setting money on fire, and also like you literally have to, like, look over your shoulder at a video village full of assholes on their phone and, like, get
yeah.
a thumbs up from them before you can move on. Like,
No,
I
I
know
know.
it's a good take. I know.
Yeah. It's infuriating. No, I
Yeah,
know, part of it is just like, I wanna be in a small cave and never see another
sure.
person interfering with what I wanna do again, like,
Yeah.
that's not and again,
And it
you know,
seems like you figured it out, Felicia. I think here
I
we
don't know,
are.
man. I don't know. My at a certain point, I'll just well, again, I have an escape hatch. I'm like, I have the privilege of like, if I can make enough of a living, again, I can always stream on Twitch and write Kindle singles that I upload myself. And if I
Sure.
could cobble it together and living like that, God bless myself. But it is a beautiful world we live in where that is a possibility for anybody. But at the end of the day, if you wanna make something, you wanna make a TV show or a film or whatever, you gotta somehow you have to compartmentalize your voice. I love this. Now you've really changed the way I think about everything. Your voice and the business of it, of the business. And, I think that's where I was a little too squishy and I just, take it too seriously and too personally, and if you do that, you're gonna die. You're just
Yeah.
gonna get pounded in the ground.
I mean, in your defense, though, I think like when we were young and decided to do this, the industry or what success looked like was different, right?
Hmm.
And so we got a version of it, but without all of the benefits that we were thinking were coming, right? Like a little
Yeah,
financial independent. Like if you had sold your company for fuck you money,
yeah.
then we would be having an utterly different conversation. Do you
I
know what I
wouldn't be
mean?
here. I'd be in Spain, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or maybe just like, "Oh, I'm partying with a bunch of rich people, and we put together an indie, and I make a movie that goes to Sundance every 4 years,
yeah, 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 yeah.
and all my
Different,
famous
yeah,
friends
very
are in it." Right?
yeah.
Um,
That's interesting, yeah.
right?
No, but
But
I think everything I did on the web was to since I was a struggling actor for so long, I think everything I did on the web was to cling to whatever independence I felt like I had, and I did have independence. I made hundreds and hundreds of videos. I made dozens of really cool shows. I made one the Guild, my outfit is in the Smithsonian Museum. Like, I mean, I made it in my closet, like like, I made a big impact with and I think because I had a taste of, like, my ideas are worth something and my audience knows it, I was struggling so hard not to go to Hollywood where I knew that I would not be valued. And so finally when I had to, because I had to leave my company for mental health reasons, like, I was like, "Okay, this is it. Go in, you're gonna do it. You have a lot of experience." I'm like, "No, it's still not working for you." So, like, I think it might just be a personality thing, and that's okay. You have to know what works for you. And I still love Hollywood for the things that aren't the things that I don't wanna give them. And I guess at
sure.
the end of the day, you know, it's great.
Yeah. I think, though, to give you some credit, I think that also Hollywood is just not making the things that they're not making anything that's not a Star Wars movie or a Marvel movie,
Agree,
right?
agree. If we were in
Right.
the early '90s and it's like
Yeah.
reality bites time, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, Squaresville was, like, one of the
Sure.
best things that came out of, those web times because it was, like, so indie, so, like, cool, so real. I was just like, "I love this show."
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you. That's
yeah,
that's
it was
great to
just
hear.
amazing. Your voice was apparent, and it always still be. That it always will be.
Well, on that note, talk about an ending, Felicia. um, do you have a few minutes more to endorse with us?
Sure, I have an endorsement, yeah.
Unpaid endorsements.
So my unpaid endorsement is a TikTok from a woman who calls herself Content by Callie, who talks about her advice for how to build a social media presence around a creative based business. And this
Huh.
is something that like I think filmmakers have a lot of anxiety about. You're unsure of like how much is should be personality, should it just be my reel? You hear about people booking jobs through Instagram now all the time, especially DPs. We'll link it in the show notes, but it gives you just a very clear um, set of recommendations that kind of just give you the guidance that you're looking for. And the big top line takeaway is that um, she describes what's called an indirect approach, right? So you're trying to just make people generally aware of you so that when people need your services, they think of you, right?
Hmm.
So it's not hard sells all the time. It's BTS content, it's relatable content, it's a little bit of how to. It's basically illustrating that you're working regularly, practicing your craft, and doing cool stuff. So that again, like I said, whether you're a musician or a filmmaker, when it's like I need a song for this reason, or I need a band or whatever, they think of you in a positive light that doesn't feel shilly.
That's awesome. I'm gonna follow Content by Kelly. I recently got on the TikTok bandwagon just like 2 months ago. I really was off of it, and I did because it was like a Vine thing. I hated Vine so much. I was like, "I'm not gonna do that," and I was like, "Felicia, you gotta get on there because Twitter is dead. That was your bread and butter. It's dead." So I'm gonna definitely follow that. Okay, so mine is way more superficial and not useful, unless Into the Woods by John York. I would say
Yeah,
that
we
amazing.
littered a couple through out there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
I recently downloaded a brand new, iPhone game called My Suika. And it's like Suika, it's a Japanese game. It's kind of like Tetris where you drop fruit and you grow the fruit. It's like the most addictive phone game I've played in quite a while. And it's the perfect thing to not look at social media, just kind
Mhm.
of play some My Suika. It's like Tetris. So I recommend it as a big time waster. It's free. It's not going to kill you. MySuika.
Gotcha.
My Suika. Okay? So just download it and have fun. I'm sorry.
Awesome. Well, Felicia, this has been great. If you have any questions for us, if you want Felicia back on the show, just shoot us an email at justshootitpod@gmail.com. No promises. She's very busy. And you can also tweet at us at justshootitpod across all social media. I'm at Mr. Matt Enlow. This episode was edited by Noah Bayshore. Thanks, Noah. And some producing by him as well. And Tyler Small. And you're listening to music provided by the Free Music Archive and the artist, Jazar. Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.